Hey folks, welcome back. My name is Krishna, and in this video I want to share with you a couple of key coloring techniques that you can use if you're just dealing with color flats. I'll do a brief overview about my coloring strategy for color flats, and then I'm going to get right into some of the techniques. So let's start off by just looking at the way I've organized my layers. When I work on a composition like this where I have multiple characters and objects, I typically like to keep everything on its own layer. So you can see here I've got, all of my characters on their own layer. This just allows me to have maximum flexibility. And then below that, each distinct element in this composition, like the skin tone for the sailor, for example, and his beard, etc., these are all on their own layers. This gives me maximum flexibility to change my mind. And I've talked about some of the techniques that I've used for quick color flatting in some of my earlier videos. Check those out. So now we're going to move forward and kind of look at how I will apply some of these advanced techniques. So first thing is, I always like to just check my color flats to make sure that I have a good range of value. Value has to do with light to dark in grayscale. So if I hit Command Y, you can see that all of my colors are now resolved to a specific grayscale value. And you can use layout, which is the way you organize your elements in a composition, along with color to pull the viewer to a focal point. In this case, I want the sailor in the center here to be the focal point. And I've talked about making montages in some of my earlier videos, so do check that out if you're curious about that. So I want to make sure that there's sufficient range and value before I begin to add highlights and shading, because if some of the colors are starting to blend, like if I've got two colors for two characters that are right next to each other, if they're the same color, I need to fix that before I start adding highlights and shading. So let's take a look at some of the techniques itself. We'll go from very simple to more advanced. And I'm not going to color the whole thing. I'm just going to show you some small sections to keep the video to a reasonable size. The first thing I want to do is I want to be able to affect the skin tone of our main sailor character. So if I have the move tool active with the keyboard shortcut V, right click, it shows me all of the layers that are underneath my cursor, and layer number 27 corresponds to this guy's skin tone. So I'm going to consider where I want the light to be coming from. In this particular case, I want the light to be coming head on. I want it to be just facing his face. So with the lasso tool, I will simply make a selection for all of those areas that are going to be receiving light. Now, how do I know where to add these, areas of light values? Well, I've looked at a lot of reference photos, and I would suggest doing that too, or playing with your camera and just move a light source around and see, take some pictures so you can see exactly how the light is affecting the face. So I've held down the Shift key, I'm using the lasso tool, and I've got multiple sections of this guy's face selected. If I hit Command J, Command U, I can now make the areas a little bit lighter, so you can see that this is where the light is actually casting on the sailor's face. I can also add dark values too. Again, going back to that skin tone layer, if I use the lasso tool, and maybe this area around his eyes is going to be darker, underneath his nose is going to be darker, inside his ears, maybe the little fold that's between his nostrils. If I hit Command J, Command U, I can add some dark values. So I'm using the lasso tool here, but I can also come back in with my brush and I can add some extra lines, so it gives it a little bit less of a flat feel, and it's like you're actually implying some texture component with your shading, right? So that's the first technique. The second technique is if you're dealing with things that are round and you want to convey a round form. So I will now switch to my move tool, right click, and it looks like it's on layer number 33. I will hold down the Command or Control key and click on the thumbnail. That's a quick way to make a selection. And I'll make a new layer above this, and I will sample this color here with the eyedropper tool, keyboard shortcut I. I'll pick a darker value of that same green. And then I'm going to switch back to the brush, and I'm going to switch to a different brush here. This soft round pressure opacity and flow brush is a really, really good brush for shading round things. And I've talked about this in previous videos, but I want to crank this up to where the size of the brush is just going to be a little bit larger than the width of this lighthouse. And again, I want to think about where the light is coming from, and I'm going to denote the shadow part of this lighthouse. So if I come back in and just paint down, you can start to see that the more pressure I exert, the darker the areas are going to be. So this gives me this nice rounded type of feeling. And I can go in with a darker value, just make the brush just a little bit smaller. And so what this will do is this gives that lighthouse a little bit of form. Last technique I want to show you is if you're trying to create some illumination on this lighthouse. So I'm going to move to the topmost layer. I still have my big brush, my soft round pressure opacity brush. I'm going to choose screen, and I'm going to choose a yellow color, and I'm going to add some illumination here. Make the brush just a little bit bigger. And what that screen layer effect will do is, this is what it looks like without it. It just looks like yellow. But screen basically allows some of those light values to intermix with the green values. So it gives a little bit more of a subtle color definition. And you can also go back as a bonus tip. You can create accents. Like if I wanted to have a dramatic feel and have this light somehow affect this character here, I can add an accent. And that gives it a little bit more of a film noir type of feel to it. It gives it a little bit more mystery. And if I look at the grayscale values here, by adding those highlights and shading, now I'm getting even more of a value range. And it's also making some of my flat colors pop a bit. So it's actually, I think, pretty useful. So those are a few quick tips and techniques. I talk about some of these techniques in greater detail, but I felt like it's been a while since we've actually looked at color. Let me know if you found some value in this video by giving it a thumbs up so other folks can find it. Let me know what you'd like me to cover in a forthcoming video by, posting a comment to this video over here. So as always, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.